The most common theory about Curious George is a Mandela effect about if George had a tail or not, but this video isn't going to be about that theory. The first theory is an interesting one and focuses more on the man with the yellow hat. His actual name is Ted, so when I say Ted, he's the person I'm referring to. People online think that George is just a science project for the man with the yellow hat. According to this theory, Ted is just doing research on George the entire time. This is why Ted allows George to explore the world and learn on his own, because he wants to see how a monkey navigates living amongst humans. Staying in the city and also in the countryside could be that Ted wants to do the experiment with George being in two different environments. To us, it's shown innocently that in each episode George learns something new. He fails and learns from his mistakes. But what if this is all part of a research project? This theory also includes that the man with the yellow hat actually created George, so this would mean that George is a human-ape hybrid and not a normal monkey. Ted didn't find George somewhere and start experimenting on him, but instead he made a human-ape hybrid and began a research project on his own creation. The evidence for George being a hybrid and created in a lab is his lack of genitalia. Since there are no other hybrids, then George doesn't have to breed with anyone, so this is why he doesn't have any genitalia. If Ted wanted more hybrids, then he could just make more of them instead of having George breed. More evidence to support this theory is that when George destroys something or makes a mess, Ted isn't really worried about having to pay for damages because he can just get the money from whoever he works for. All the destruction that George causes is just collateral damage to Ted's research project, so whoever he works for wouldn't mind paying for what George does. This next theory is also about the man with the yellow hat, and it's that Ted is a thief and just uses George to his advantage. He sends out George to cause mayhem, and in the meantime, Ted steals what he wants. You could even say that when Ted and George head out to the countryside, it's because Ted needs to lay low from the law. What the man with the yellow hat is stealing could be money or expensive items like paintings, or even smaller things like groceries or entire meals. A lot of people ask that how does Ted even afford things or have enough money to raise a monkey? Maybe it's because he's stealing and is a great criminal, so he's made enough to take care of him and George. This might be a silly theory, but it makes a little bit of sense. Ted finds a monkey and knows people will find him adorable and get distracted, so he brings in George not because he wants to raise a monkey, but because it's a great idea that will help him rob and steal more efficiently. The next theory is one that is pretty common with a lot of cartoons, and it's that everything is in the character's head. For all we know, the man with the yellow hat is mentally insane and is just imagining that he's raising a monkey as his own son. Everything that we see George do could be Ted, who's actually doing it, but he's imagining George as the one who's doing all these things. Maybe when everyone is nice to George, they're actually being nice to Ted because they know he's insane and are just going along with whatever he's imagining. Why this theory isn't too strong is because if the man with the yellow hat is insane and everything is in his head, then George would also speak. If you're going to imagine raising a monkey, then you would go all the way and have him speak. These are the most interesting Curious George conspiracy theories I could find. The rest are too silly or don't have too much backing. The one I believe the most is the first one about Ted creating George and running an experiment on him. There's too many things that add up and make sense for this theory not to be true. At the end of the day, Curious George is definitely in the top 10 cartoons of all time, so I'm glad there's conspiracy theories about the show. Comment down below if I missed any theories, or if you have any of your own conspiracy theories about George and the man with the yellow hat.